Hello and welcome to Jason's Macintosh Museum. I'm Jason, your host, as always, and today we're looking at a Macintosh PowerBook 5300 from 1995. Now normally when I select a model of Macintosh to look at on the next episode of Jason's Macintosh Museum, I'll either usually pick one at random, or I'll pick one that I've recently got to work, or I'll pick one based on viewer requests. But this time I've chosen the 5300 for a very specific reason, and it's all to do with Samsung. Now, those of you who have been following Samsung's latest woes with their Galaxy Note 7 smartphone understand that it's a very bad thing to release a product onto the market that can more or less overheat and catch fire. That's about as bad as it gets. But yet, people who are following this may not know that products that have overheating batteries and batteries that will catch fire, that's nothing new. And in fact, the 5300 PowerBook really, I think, holds the dubious honor of being the very first consumer product that had a well-publicized battery overheating and fire problem. Now, the PowerBook 5300 was a really important product for Apple when it was released in 1995, because it was the very first PowerBook to utilize the PowerPC CPU. And so this was very important because prior to this model, Apple's flagship laptop was the 500 series, the 520 and 540, which as laptops go were excellent. They were well made, they were very well designed, and they also were very, very robust. The problem was that they were based on the 68040 CPU, and so as the PowerPC chip was finding its way into more and more Macintosh desktops, there was a real push for Apple to develop a laptop based on that same chip, and this was the result. But the 5300 was a real headache for Apple when it was launched, or just after it was launched, because apart from the battery issues, which I'll come back to later, there were also other fairly major issues with this particular model, some of which were due to poor design, some of which were due to poor build. So, all in all, the 5300 was really is really renowned as being one of Apple's worst laptops and one of their worst ever products. But let me explain what the problems were in a bit more detail. So first, let's talk about the batteries. Now, this all stems down to Apple's decision to launch the 5300 with lithium-ion battery packs as standard. Now, if you think back to the year it was launched, 1995, lithium-ion batteries were relatively uncommon in consumer products. NiCad was still being used quite widely, as was nickel metal hydride. But lithium-ion was still quite new, and Apple wanted to, mainly because of the fact this machine had a PowerPC chip and therefore used a bit more power than your average 68040, they wanted to put lithium-ion batteries into this model to give it good battery life, and also to save weight. Makes sense. So they basically contracted Sony to manufacture the lithium-ion batteries that would be used in this model. Now, that would have been fine. But what actually happened was that literally only days after production of these models had started, the word got out that several 5300s had actually, while charging, had actually overheated and caught fire. Now, thankfully, this all happened before the 5300 actually got out onto the market. I believe at the time they'd produced about 1,000 of them, which were then sent out to their distributors, but they hadn't actually sold any. So if I remember, I think only one 5300 with the lithium-ion battery actually made its way into the hands of an end user. So Apple had to recall all of the 1,000 that they had built and the one that they'd sold, and they had to retrofit them with nickel metal hydride battery packs, which were a lot safer. Unfortunately, they didn't give the same battery life that they were expecting or that they'd actually promoted for this model. So that was a bit of a problem. And it's interesting to me that rather than try to solve the lithium-ion battery issue, whether it was faulty manufacturing or incorrectly calibrated charging circuitry inside the device, it's surprising that they decided then to basically give up on lithium-ion batteries altogether for this model and stick with nickel metal hydride. Because the 5300, during its entire life, which was only 1 year on the market in fact, it only ever shipped with lithium-ion, with nickel metal hydride batteries. Now, it's also interesting to note that even though only one of the faulty machines ever made its way into the hands of an end user, the word was out. Everybody knew about it, and it was a major embarrassment for Apple. And it sort of coined the term the flaming PowerBook, which is what this model was referred to in a somewhat humorous sense. Now, if the battery issue had been the only problem with the 5300, it probably wouldn't really have mattered, because, as I mentioned, the battery issue never really impacted the end user, because by the time the machines were starting to be sold, the battery issue had been resolved, albeit by switching battery types. Unfortunately, there were other problems, and let's start with some of the design problems first. And the first one is to do with the module expansion bay that was built into the 5300. You see, Apple thought, and they were very forward-thinking in this respect, they thought that they would put into the 5300 a special bay into which you can put a multitude of different devices. In other words, it was a bay that could accept a floppy drive, or a zip drive, or a modem, or any other device that the third-party manufacturer might want to produce. And the idea is you can simply take a module out and swap another module in and up. They were designed to be hot swappable as well, which was very forward-thinking. Unfortunately, someone, well, whether it was a deliberate action or an oversight, I'm not entirely sure, but the problem lies in the size of the expansion bay, which, as you can see, is wide enough for a conventional floppy drive or a zip drive. Well, that's fine. Unfortunately, you can't put a CD-ROM in here because the bay is physically not big enough. Now, you would have thought if they would have extended the size of the bay out another centimetre or so, maybe at the expense of the battery, or maybe making the entire case a little bit wider, then you would be able to put a CD-ROM in. But that never happened. So what you ended up with was a hot swappable expansion bay that could not accept a CD-ROM drive, which at the time was unforgivable. Because if you're giving the user the ability to install drives into the system, why not have a CD-ROM? It's silly. So as a result, if you wanted a CD-ROM, you had to hook up one externally via the SCSI port, which was a little inconvenient. And another issue related to the expansion bay is that for some reason, when Apple designed the power adapter for use with the 5300, it didn't provide enough current to power some of the more power-hungry modules that you could put into the expansion bay. So in that sense, you had an expansion bay that couldn't take a CD-ROM and couldn't take a device that used a large amount of power. That was another problem. And then another problem related to the power adapter was the design of the plug. The plug, in fact, let's see if I can show you the socket at least. The socket for the AC adapter is extremely small and quite long. And as a result, these power supply connectors are notorious for either breaking off or becoming loose, mainly due to bad solder joints, which apparently showed up very early in the PowerBook's life. And that, of course, meant that you couldn't use the machine at all in that scenario. Another problem. But the problems just keep on coming. The next issue was, in fact, Apple really not learning from their mistakes with the PowerBook 100 series. It's the old problem of plastics, and specifically the plastics used in the area of the screen hinge assembly. Basically, these PowerBooks had the same problem that the 100 series did, where over time the plastics became very brittle. And just like the PowerBook 100 series, the screen hinge on the 5300 is implemented by having a metal hinge that attaches to the plastic casing of the screen by means of threaded inserts that are basically cast, well not cast, but melted in place and bonded to the plastic. And what happens? Of course, over time, with the continual opening and closing of the screen, you are flexing the connection between the metal hinge and the plastic casing. And eventually those threaded inserts break away from the plastic and the screen basically becomes very loose and floppy. And I think another problem was actually due to the screen hinge itself malfunctioning. Not sure exactly what was causing that, but there were all sorts of different problems. And then we come to the problem that really would have been, as far as the end user was concerned, who bought this machine new, would have been probably the biggest problem of all, and that was to do with performance. Now, although the 5300s used the PowerPC 603E chip at 100 MHz, which was quite good at the time, Apple chose to leave out the level 2 cache. Why? Well, cost possibly, or space concerns on the logic board, I'm not sure. But the problem was compounded by the fact that they did not even allow you to add one as an option. You were stuck. You didn't have a level 2 cache. And anyone who's used these older PowerPC Macs knows that if you run a PowerPC chip without a level 2 cache, the performance is considerably less than what you would have if you did have the level 2 cache. So, as a result, we have a laptop which had battery issues, design issues, build issues, and performance issues. So it really was not a great product. That's probably why it was only on the market for 1 year before it was replaced with the, I think it was the PowerBook 3400C, which was a much, much better unit. Although it looked very much the same, inside it was radically different. So let's talk about the specifications. Now, the first thing to note is the PowerBook 5300 notebook. There's actually 4 different models in the range, and they differ based on mainly the screen, but also the CPU. So the base model was the 5300, and that actually had a black and white passive matrix screen. Now, quite why you'd buy the most powerful laptop Apple made at the time and then fit it with a black and white screen, I'm not entirely sure. I don't think many of those were ever sold, but I do actually have one, which I'll show you in a moment. Then the next step up from that was the PowerBook 5300 CS, which had a passive matrix color display. Then the next step up from that was this version here, which is the 5300C, which had an active matrix color display. And then the top of the line model was the 5300CE, which had the active matrix display, plus it had a 117 MHz CPU rather than the 100 MHz chip. So, apart from that though, the models all had the PowerPC 603E chip, and they had 8 MB of memory, a standard expandable up to 64 MB, and the hard drives were either a 500, 750 or 1.1 GB drive. And it's worth noting as well that the 5300s also used IDE hard disks. I think they're only the second model of PowerBook to do so. I think the PowerBook 150 was the very first one to use them, and then the 5300 followed along. So it does mean that hard drive replacement for these is a little bit easier because they take a standard 2.5-inch parallel ATA IDE drive. Having said that though, because of the controller that this uses, I do believe that I think drives that, I think if the drive can't support PIO mode 4, I don't think the drive will work, because if I remember, the controllers for the IDE drives in these PowerBooks don't support DMA mode, but I'm sure you can look that up and confirm that. Other than that though, all the models use the same style of case, they use the same batteries, and they had more or less the same expansion ports. You had two Pcmcia card slots on the side, and you had an IR port on the back, along with a HDI SCSI port. I think you had a serial port and audio in and out. And you also, I've just had a quick look, you also had a display output port, which needed a special adapter, and also an ADB port, which was nice because the PowerBook 150 didn't give you one of those. You also had built-in speakers and microphone, yeah, and that's about it. So, I should also mention, as I mentioned before, the PowerBook was actually only on the market for about 1 year. It was launched in August of 1995 and discontinued in August of 1996. So, again, not really on the market for a very long time. Now, although the 5300 did have all of these well-publicized problems, Apple did, to their credit, try their best to alleviate a lot of these problems. Obviously, the battery issue was solved before the machine made it into the hands of the consumer, but the other issues were covered under what was called a return extension authorization program. I think that's what they call it. It's an REA. I have to find out what that stands for. I think it stands for that. Which was basically an extended warranty, if you like, where anyone who had an original 5300 could take it to an Apple service center, and Apple would change a lot of the internal parts to help the machines run more reliably and to solve a lot of these problems. And it's amazing when you think about it, because I've actually I've read through the REA document that explains what parts are changed as part of the repair, and they basically change all sorts of things. They more or less replace every part in the laptop. Depending on the serial number, you replace the this panel here, which includes the touchpad. You replace the logic board. You replace the screen hinges. You replace the case plastics. It's unbelievable. They may as well have just given you a whole new machine. But it's also worth noting that for the specific issue of the case plastics and screen hinge problems, Apple actually offered a 7-year warranty on that repair. So that was really unprecedented in the industry, because the machines only had a 1-year warranty at the time. Pretty sure it was only 1 year. But for Apple to allow you to have that issue fixed up to 7 years after the original date of purchase was pretty good. And as a result, you find that most 5300s that you come across now have already had that work done to them, which is why this one, for example, has a nice tight hinge and doesn't have an issue with the screen, with the case plastics or the screen hinges. But I'll explain how you can actually tell if yours has had the work done to it when we have a closer look at this. So that's really all there is to say about the PowerBook 5300. So let's have a closer look at it. Just to show you the difference between the regular 5300 and the higher end models, you can see that on the right hand side we have a 5300 base model, as you can see, and notice that the screen is physically smaller. Okay, well here's a quick look at the 5300C alongside the standard 5300. Now internally the machines have the same specifications, although the C has a bit more memory fitted to it, but they have the same CPU, the same logic board, pretty much everything is the same. The difference is the screen. And as I mentioned before, to me it seems silly why Apple would offer a black and white version of the 5300, because at the time it was their, stupid power saving, it was their flagship product, and well, their flagship laptop certainly. But they did, and you can see what a difference that makes. So on the left we have the 5300C with the, I think it's the 10-inch active matrix color display running macOS 9.1, although it takes forever to boot, which I'll show you in a minute. And on the right we have the, I think it's a 9-inch passive matrix black and white screen. I think it's grayscale, but I think it's 4-bit. I think. So I think 16 shades of grey. It's an easy way to find out. If I just go here, and I go here, that will probably tell me. Yep, 16 grayscale. But you can see it might be a good quality passive matrix grayscale display, but it's still a passive matrix grayscale display. And so you can tell that it would really, I don't know, it would really be frustrating to use it for any real period of time. But interesting to note that they did offer that version. But something I'm going to try here, just to show you as well the performance issues of the 5300. Certainly if you're running a Mac OS, say above about 8.5, is I'm going to do a little race between these two machines. Now these machines have the same CPU running at the same speed, and yet the one on the right is running system 7.6 and the one on the left is running 9.1. Let's see how much of a difference in the boot time there is between the two machines. Now hopefully if I can, actually what I'll do is I'll cheat. If I do this, no, it's not going to, oh, doesn't let me, oh there we go. Can I do that on here? There we go. So if I push, actually no, what I'll do, I'll shut them both down and I'll hit the power buttons at the same time. Okay, so let's see what happens. It's also worth noting that the 5300 has a faster hard disk as well, so it should have an advantage over the black and white version. There we go. So the 5300 is already, well, the black and white model is already ahead. It's loading the system extensions. Oh, now the 9.1 started loading system extensions. I think you'll find the black and white model is almost done. That's it. Whereas the one running 9.1, well, this could take a minute. Come on, come on. Okay, I think we're there. No, we're not. Still going. No, now we're done. So, so as you can see, it does take a lot longer to boot 9.1 than 7.6. So something to keep in mind. But certainly, if you boot 9.1 on, say, a slightly newer model of PowerBook with a level 2 cache, you'll find that that it's actually a much quicker. Even say 100 megahertz. Well, for example, in fact, even the Power Macintosh 6100 66 with a level 2 cache boots up 9.1 significantly faster than this does. But that's mainly down to the fact that it has a level 2 cache, even though the CPU clock speed is lower. Okay, well, here's the front view of the Macintosh PowerBook 5300, and I have to say, design issues apart, I think it's actually a very attractive and very nice looking system, because you'll notice, compared with the PowerBooks that came before this, in other words the 100 series, Apple changed the colour of the plastics from the very light grey to a very dark, almost black colour, which I think looks a whole lot better. And so what we have starting from the front, we've got the trackpad, which is actually another PowerBook 5300 first, if I remember, in that this was the first PowerBook to use a trackpad rather than the trackball, which actually works quite well. And then you've got the keyboard just up here, which is a standard keyboard used on all the 5300 models and also all of the 190 models. Then up here you've got the Apple logo, Macintosh nameplate and model designation, and the speaker is just there below the Apple logo. Off to the side of the screen you've got the built-in microphone down here. You've got brightness and contrast controls for the screen, and then you've got the screen itself, which in this case I think is a 9 point, or is it? I think it's a 9. Could be a. I think it's a 9.4 inch active matrix color. Up the top you've got the PowerPC designation and case hinge, case latch, and that's about it for the front. So we'll just give it. We'll just turn it round quickly and have a look at the side. So on this side, there we are. We've got the two Pcmcia card slots here. And notice another neat feature of the 5300 is that unlike most PCs at the time that used Pcmcia card slots, these are at focus. There we go. These are actually electronically or electrically released. In other words, there's no button, there's no physical button that you push to move a lever which ejects the card. All you do is push on either of these two buttons here, which are nothing more than switches, and the system will automatically, via a solenoid, pop the card out, which is quite cool, because it also meant you could eject a Pcmcia card from the operating system itself rather than having to push a button on the side. And then over here we have one of the two case feet, and again, unlike the old 100 series PowerBooks which had the rotating knob to extend the case feet, all you do with this is, these are spring loaded. You just pick it up, push this button, and the foot pops out, just like that. The only trouble is to put it back, it's sort of a two-handed operation. You have to push in on this while you push up on the foot, and then you have to push it all the way in while holding the button. So it's easy to extend, but a little difficult to retract. Okay, that's that side. Let's have a quick look at the other side. There we go. So on this side, this is where the battery goes. No, it doesn't. Yes, it does. What am I talking about? Yeah. Yes, that's where the battery goes, and the button to release the battery is actually on the front. If you look, it's actually down there. So push and slide out, and the battery comes out. So that's the battery. And then here we have the expansion bay, which in this case is containing a standard 1.4 megabyte Apple SuperDrive. But you can, of course, put in other devices in there, not a CD-ROM, of course, but any other devices such as, I think there was a zip drive, expansion module, and there were some other ones that I've forgotten about. But in order to eject the expansion module, you had to move a lever on the bottom of the case, which I'll show you when we look at the bottom. But anyhow, there's the other button for the foot on the other side. Now, if we look at the back, by default, you don't see very much. You've got an IR port, you've got an IR port, an out of focus IR port. Come on, you stupid camera. Oi, focus. Okay, I finally got the damn thing to focus. Here we are. So that's the infrared port. And then next to that we have, on the other end, we have the AC charging port. And then behind this door, we have the remainder of the ports. If I can get this to open. Yes, it's one side's broken, but that's to be expected. And so from the left we have the reset button down here. We have the display output connector up here. I'm not sure what the term for that connector is or what they call it, but it does need a special adapter. I think it could be a HDI something or other, but it's the same as the one that was used on the 100 series PowerBooks. And then we have the, what have we got there? We've got the microphone in and audio out ports. Then we have the, I can't zoom in anymore. Then we have the HDI port for an external SCSI device, serial port, and an ADB port. So you really got all the ports that you needed with this. And of course, if you wanted to add something like a modem or an Ethernet adapter, you could actually plug it into one of the Pcmcia slots by way of a PC card. So now what we'll do is we'll have a quick look at the underside. So let me just get that in position. I'm actually surprised I was able to get it to stand on its front without falling over. So here's the underside of the 5300, and the lever to release the expansion bay is this lever here. So if you slide that to the left, it will lock into position, and then you can pull. There we go. You can pull the expansion module out, and then when you put it back in, it will lock into position like that. Okay, so other than that, we have the information tag, PowerBook 5300 series, assembled in USA. That's interesting. So I thought by this time Apple had stopped making their products in the US. There you go. And above we have the serial number label. Now, this is quite important. If you want to know if your PowerBook has been through the REA program, where Apple have basically repaired the unit under warranty, you need to look at that sticker, because what you will see, it's not going to stand up like this, is it? I'm just going to tilt it. There we go. Oh, what are we looking at there? This sticker. Oh, I did have it the right way round. Silly. I thought it was upside down. There's the sticker. Now, if you look in the corner, if the thing will focus, if you look at the bottom right-hand corner of the sticker, you'll see the letters AA. And the AA indicates this has had the repairs done to it. But you'll find probably most PowerBook 5300s that are still around will have had that work done, because at the time it was a major recall and repair campaign, and pretty much every owner of a 5300 was encouraged to, or at least they would have taken part, given that it was at no cost to them. So there we go. That's a look at the 5300. So what we'll do now, as always, is we will take it apart. Okay, so the first step in taking the 5300 apart is to take out the battery and the expansion bay module. So just flip it over. Now, to take the battery out, there's a button here, so we'll push that and the battery comes out. Set that aside. And with the expansion module, we have to move this lever out, and then we can pull on the module to remove that. Okay, now the next step is to take out the keyboard. Now, the keyboard is held in from the bottom with these three screws here. So we'll just take them out. Notice they're long screws as well. So we'll just there we are. Just put them aside. Now, if we turn the machine over and open it up, we should find that the keyboard is now loose. So just thinking of an easy way to pop it up. If I might just tap on it from the side, it will probably, if I tilt it over, it'll probably fall Oh, there it goes. So, so the keyboard is now loose, but obviously because the keyboard has to be connected via a cable, you don't want to pull straight up on it because you could damage the ribbon cable. So just very carefully pull it back to disengage the slots that run along here, and then flip it over like that. And then what we have is we have two connectors back here. But at this point, because this PowerBook has a memory expansion module, which is this board here, it's probably easier to take that out first because it makes getting to the connectors for the keyboard a lot easier. So to do that, we just very carefully pull up on this corner, because this is where the connector is. There's the memory module. We'll take that out. So at this point we can see the two connectors, one here and one here. So these are the standard ribbon cable connectors. So you're supposed to get a small screwdriver and basically pop the latch, but I find that if you're very careful with the cable, if you just wiggle it very carefully, you can pull it out without damaging it with the lock in place. But just be very careful, just be very, very careful. There we are. So there's the cables disconnected, and that's the keyboard out. So at this point, what we're seeing here is we have the bay for the Pcmcia cards, we have the bay for the expansion module, and the bay for the battery. This is the heatsink, which connects to the CPU on the logic board, which I believe is down about here. So the next step is to remove these, I think they call them the clutch covers, I think, for the screen hinge. So we'll open the screen up all the way and very carefully pull up on the cover, and it will unclip. There's one, and same on the other side. Just be very careful. There's the other one. Now, it's an important note when you're reassembling this is the clutch covers are supposed to have, like this one, this plastic piece on the end. And the keyboard sits on top of this, and the screw that holds the keyboard down goes through here into the bottom of the case. Now, on most clutch covers that I've seen, that part is broken off like it is on here. And what will happen is that if this is broken off, the keyboard actually will sit slightly lower in the case than it should, because this piece is not there for the keyboard to sit on. So the problem then is, as you're tightening the screws down that hold the keyboard in place, you can actually pull the keyboard and too far down and distort the keyboard itself, so be very careful of that. Okay, so the next step is we'll take off the palm rest here, including the trackpad. Now we have the trackpad cable just here. Now the way I like to do it is I like to pull up on the back of the palm rest and then flip it over, and I can then disconnect the trackpad cable. Now again, being a ribbon cable, it has the little locking connector, so I'll just carefully pull up on the little tab. Be very careful because these are very, very fragile, and then I should be able to very carefully pull the ribbon cable out. There we go. And it's actually worth noting that I can tell, not just from the label, but I can tell this machine has been through the REA program, because if you look at the date on the inside of the palm rest, February 1997. Now the PowerBook was this model was long out of production by 1997, so this was obviously a piece that was made for the recall or the return of the REA program, because this is one of the parts that the REA program instructed the Apple technicians to replace when servicing these models. So there's the trackpad assembly there. Okay. In fact, even the bottom case has been replaced. You see that's dated April 1997. So yes, this machine's definitely been overhauled. Right, so we get a better look at the internals. We've got the hard drive here. This is I believe it's the DC to DC converter board that also interfaces with the battery terminals over here. And so what we'll do is I think we'll take the hard drive out. Now to do that, we have 3 more screws to take out. We have one here, one here, and one over here. So we'll just very carefully take them out. Now, of course, you do not want to over tighten these when you're putting them in, because otherwise you can damage the case plastics. Okay, let's take these out. And these ones are coarse thread screws, not the fine thread screws that we took out for the keyboard. So I'll just set them aside. Now, at this point, we should be able to pull this whole unit up and out. We should be able to. I think there's anything else holding it in. So I'll just be very careful. There it goes. But at this point, the hard drive is still attached via its cable. So we'll just flip that over. And we can now carefully pull up on the connector to release the hard drive ribbon cable. There we are. So the hard drive is now out. We'll have a closer look at that a little bit later. And notice that the DC-DC converter board has unplugged, but notice there is a backup battery. Whoops. Might just rest that against there. There's the backup battery that is attached to the converter board, so just keep that to such a mate. I might actually unplug that, come to think of it, because these batteries, as you know, can corrode. And in fact, this one has already started to do so. If you look here, focus, bloody thing, if you can see the corrosion on the connector. So it's probably just as well that I've done that. I'm just going to unplug. Oh yeah, that's pretty green in there. So, if you can see the connector. So yeah, just as well I've unplugged that now. Obviously the battery acid has through capillary action, worked its way from the battery up through the cable to the plug. So just as well I'm taking that out. Because in fact this machine actually shows signs of main battery corrosion. You can see the discoloration here, and even on the DC-DC converter board where the battery terminals are, you can see the slight discoloration here. Thankfully it hasn't eaten away at the terminals. As I've shown before, there are some PowerBooks I've seen where the corrosion was so severe that it actually ate the terminals away altogether. So that's definitely not a good thing. So, right. So what we'll do now, I think, is we'll take out the heatsink. This is the main CPU here. Now, it's just a thermal conductive pad. There's no heatsink grease to worry about, so if you just be very careful and pull up on there. There you go, it comes out. Oh, well that's funny. There's no pad. That's not good. Hope this thing wasn't overheating. I might have to put some heatsink grease in there, because I'm pretty sure there's supposed to be a thermal conductive pad that sits on here, and probably also sits on here, because these two chips have to be cooled. Oh, good thing I found that. Okay, so next up, let's have a look. I think that is the expansion bay activity indicator. So we'll unplug the connector for that. Get that out of the way. So now we have, let's see, we have the, this is the video out board that drives the external connector. But before you take that out, you have to go around to the back, because because it's held in place by a screw here. So don't try and take that board out until you take the screw out. There we go. Now we can, oops, put that back in. So now we can take the board out, but there's a ribbon cable to unhook, which goes to the, looks like the IR module up the back here. So we have to unplug it, and it's sitting just in there. So a bit hard to get to. I'm just thinking which way we should attack this. If I pull up, oh no, there's another screw to undo right here before we can take that board out. Looks like it's captive to the board. I can't seem to remove it all, take it out all the way. Okay, so I should be able to pull up on this to release the connector, and if I carefully slide it back, I can slide it under the ribbon cable and take it out. Right, so that's the video out board there. And the reason I couldn't take the screw out is because it has a standoff just here. So we'll leave that in place, obviously. Now we can unhook the ribbon cable for the IR module. There we go. Right, next step is to unhook the display connector back here. So we just very carefully, again, be very careful, just pop that connector off like that. There we go. Now at this point, I'm pretty sure we can pull the logic board out. I'm just going to move the ribbon cable out of the way. Just move this, there we go, just pop that up there out of the way. So at this point I should be able to pull the logic board up and out of the case. That's the theory. Let's see if it works. Just be very, very careful. Up, there we go. There it is. So that's the so that's the logic board out of the 5300. Very good. Now, if we wanted to take the display, separate the display from the case, we simply have to take out two screws here and here. So you can see they're metal hinges, but on this side, of course, they screw into the metal, actually no, the very, very rigid plastic case of the lower case. But on the screen themselves, on the screen itself, I should say, the hinges actually screw into the plastic casing. So that's obviously not good. I mean, this one's in good shape. You can see it's there's no play here, there's no play here. But if you find there's play when you move these relative to the screen itself, the screws that hold the hinge to the screen, the plastic standoffs have obviously snapped or broken away from the casing, so you need to take a look at that. So that's the screen, we'll put that aside. And I think that's about it. I think there's really nothing more to take out. Got the IR module in there, but I'm not really sure how you take that out. Just having a look. Maybe it's screwed in from the I don't know. Well, let's keep going. Let's take out the this plastic piece here. It's just there for appearances, I think. Let's take those out. There we go. Now I think to take this section out, we have to remove 1, 2, 3 screws at the back. Of course, my screwdriver doesn't have a long enough reach for that. Maybe if I just put it... it's magnetic, so it's not going to... okay. Well, I can't do that. I can't do that, but I presume if you take these 3 screws out, you can separate... Actually, that's actually broken. That's broken. That's not supposed to do that. Interesting. Just looking at the date on this piece is actually the original piece. It's dated 1990. What is it? It's dated. Looks like late 1994. Really? Am I reading that right? Oh well, not really sure. But that's the date stamp on that piece. But the lower case, of course, is 1997. So I think that's about all we can do there to take the PowerBook apart. So let's have a close look at some of the components. Okay, well here is a logic board out of the PowerBook 5300, and hopefully this camera will let me zoom in a bit. I can look at some of the components. So working up from the top, we have the connector for that would be for the expansion bay. And then, what's that? Oh, focus. It's about as close as I can go, I think. That's the connector, I think, for the, that'd be for the memory expansion module. No, it's not. Hang on. Which way am I looking at this? That's the display out board connector. Main CPU here, the 603E at 100 megahertz. Oh, I can't go any closer than that. And we have a chip here which is another Motorola chip, I think. I'm not sure, it's probably Glue Logic or something like that. Then we have, looks like the ROM chip here. Probably maybe a flash chip there, I'm not sure, but let's see, probably more Glue Logic down here. That's probably video memory there. That's probably the power management chip there, because I think the what hooks up to that? Let's see. Oh, that's the hard disk. The hard disk hooks up to that connector at the bottom there. Yep. So if we go across, this is the bay for the Pcmcia cards. Trackpad connects there. Keyboard connects there. That's where the memory expansion module. Does it? No, it connects over here. That long connector there, that's where the memory expansion module connects to. That's where the display connects to, that's right. And there's the infamous power connector. So you can see what I mean when you look at them, you realize, you understand how they had a habit of breaking off, because the size of the connector, the size of the socket is very small, and it's only held onto the board by solder joints. That's all. So, I'll have a closer look at that in a minute. That little board there is for the eject switches for the Pcmcia slots, the modem and ADB ports, HDI port for SCSI audio, and that's the reset button there. Okay, it's about all there is to see on the front of the board, but there's more to see on the back, so let me flip it over, whoops, and we'll have a quick look at the back. So obviously to utilize all the available space, they put components on both sides of the board, as you can see. So let's have a look at what we have on here. So looks like another RAM chip, I think, or another. Actually, no, that'd be the other ROM chip. That's a TI controller. Not much sure. That could actually be the PC card controller, possibly. Because I think a lot of Pcmcia card controllers were Texas Instruments chips back in the day. More RAM chips there, I think. Hello, what's this? Oh, God, this camera does not want to focus. No manufacturer marking on that one. It's probably another Apple proprietary Glue Logic chip. AMD chip there. Could be for the SCSI controller. And Chips and Technologies, that has got to be the display controller for the LCD. That's about it. But actually, down here, these are the solder joints that hold the power, the AC adapter connector on. As you can see, 3 tiny solder joints. That's all that is holding this socket onto the board. There's no reinforcement at all, which is pretty silly, because I've come across many 5300s and the 190s which use the same connector, where due to the solder joints breaking, the connector will be loose, and of course you get intermittent power, or no power at all. I mean, the fix is fairly simple. You simply resolder the connector, but certainly the design wasn't really as robust as it could have been. I mean, we think of how things are now with the Apple MagSafe connectors, which basically can't damage the connector if the cord is yanked out or moved. Yes, it's just shows you how far things have come in that respect. But I think that's about it for the underside of the board. Various other passive components and what have you. So that's the logic board out of the 5300. So let's see, we'll have a quick look at the hard disk now. Okay, well, here is the hard disk out of the PowerBook 5300, and it's the original drive that was fitted to the machine. You can see it has the Apple computer label. Focus. So you can see it's a 750 megabyte 2.5-inch AT, in other words IDE drive, made by IBM, a DPRA 20810, dated September 96. So this drive, I'm pretty sure I think it's a 5,000 RPM 811 meg drive, but Apple, which is nice of them, they quote the formatted capacity of 750 megabytes. And it's a shame they didn't fit a faster drive though. A 5400 RPM drive would have been a little bit better for a machine like this, but anyhow, that's just how it is. So let me just, well, not much to see on the back, apart from the bottom of the motor and the bottom of the board. Okay, not much to see there. Right. Okay, well that's the hard disk. So now we'll have a quick look at the battery. Okay, well here's the battery out of the 5300. Now, I've just had to lean it up against a little box because these batteries won't stand up by themselves. So this is the battery that would have been used in the 5300, and you can see it's nickel metal hydride. There we go. Right, so that's the battery. Now it's worth noting though that by the time the PowerBook 3400 was released, it actually had lithium-ion batteries available for use with it, and they looked the same as this. They had the same physical case and the same contacts, but you can't use one in a 5300 because the circuitry to charge them isn't present, or at least it's not compatible with that type of battery. So if you put a lithium-ion battery in a 5300, you won't do any damage, but the machine will not work. It won't run off the battery and it won't charge it. But the other way though, if you can run a 3400 off the nickel metal hydride or lithium-ion batteries, but you'll be able to tell them apart because it actually says in the top line, lithium-ion battery for PowerBook 3400. But this is the one that was used in the 5300, and this one actually still works. It still holds a charge, which is quite surprising. But something I've mentioned before, which you need to be very careful of, is corrosion of the batteries, especially the nickel metal hydride ones like this one, because I've seen many instances where people have taken an old PowerBook, they've left the battery in it, and they've let it sit for a long time. And what will happen, set that up like that, and what will happen is in some cases, the battery will start to corrode internally and eat away at the terminals. Whoops. Which also means that if the battery is within a PowerBook, it also eats away at the contacts inside the machine. And as I mentioned before, here's the DC-DC converter board out of the 5300 I just pulled apart. And if you look at the connectors, you can see the green traces on there. Now, thankfully, I can clean those up. It's not a big deal because the actual terminals are still intact. But I've seen some where they've corroded away to the point where there's nothing left. There is no metal left at all, in which case the machine will run off AC power, but you won't be able to run off battery and you won't be able to charge batteries. So it's something to keep in mind. And I think finally we'll have a look at the memory expansion card. Okay, well here's the memory expansion card out of the 5300. This is an aftermarket card. I don't think it's an Apple card because they normally don't focus. They don't normally show the capacity on a label, in this case 32 megabytes. Really nothing more than a whole bunch of memory chips and a big connector. There's no real extra logic on here. Nothing on the back, but you can see it was obviously designed to be outfitted with more chips, so it would become a 64 megabyte module, but this one's a 32. So I bet you that cost quite a bit of money back in the day, or for 32 megabytes. Now 32 gigabytes is is not really considered that fancy either. How times have changed. So, that was our look at the Macintosh PowerBook 5300C from 1995. So, hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for part 2 where, like every Macintosh, we'll demonstrate it and play a few games on it. Oh, and if you didn't know by now, stay tuned after this, at the end of this video, for the blooper reel. Trust me, these videos never go smoothly on the first attempt, so I have to make several attempts to get things right. I'll put it that way. So if you didn't already know, the blooper reel will be shown just after this. So enjoy. Now normally when I look, obviously have overheating. No, I don't want to do. No. Aside from the battery issues, which I'll come back to in a bit, that had a built-in, what the hell do they call them? Docking? No, not docking. A problem that would have impacted. No. Then the step up from that is the PowerBook 5300 CE, and the C. No, not the C. Is it the C or the CS? Damn it! Because if you've seen a PowerBook 190, it's the same as the 5300. It simply just has. No. And I have to say, it's, I think, a very well designed casing.